Something strange is already happening in Atlanta, and the season hasn't even started yet. Just weeks into the new era under Kevin Stefanski, reports and fan reactions suggest the situation might already be slipping out of control. Several players have chosen to leave during free agency, and the timing has raised a lot of eyebrows across the league. Officially, the explanation points to salary cap limitations, but online, many fans believe there could be more going on behind the scenes. Some supporters are now speculating that certain players simply didn't want to stick around for the new direction of the team. Whether that's true or not remains unclear, but the conversation has been spreading fast across sports media and social platforms. And while this drama continues to unfold in Atlanta with the Atlanta Falcons, one name keeps coming up in the discussion: Shedeur Sanders. Because if things keep unraveling the way they are, some fans believe Sanders might end up having the last laugh. But this is only the beginning of the story. The situation in Atlanta started raising eyebrows the moment free agency opened. For many fans, the timing felt almost too perfect. Just as the new coaching era under Kevin Stefanski was beginning, several players from the Atlanta Falcons suddenly found themselves heading out the door. Official reports explained the moves as normal roster adjustments and salary cap decisions. But across sports media and online discussions, people began wondering if something deeper might be happening behind the scenes. One of the most notable departures involved running back Tyler Allgeier. After spending several seasons in Atlanta and building a reputation as a reliable piece of the offense, he reportedly agreed to a new deal with the Arizona Cardinals. For many fans, losing a productive back like Allgeier felt like a surprising move, especially during a period when stability should have been the priority. And he wasn't the only one leaving. Defensive lineman David Onyemata also moved on, reportedly signing with the New York Jets. Onyemata had been an important presence on the defensive front, and his exit created another gap the Falcons would now have to address. Around the same time, defender D'Angelo Malone reportedly landed a deal with the Buffalo Bills, adding yet another name to the growing list of players moving on. On paper, the explanation sounded simple. The Falcons had limited salary cap space, and difficult roster decisions were expected. Teams across the league face similar challenges every offseason, and sometimes players simply find better opportunities elsewhere. But the pattern still caught the attention of fans and commentators who were already watching the team closely during this coaching transition. Some observers began pointing out how quickly these changes happened once Stefanski stepped in. While there's no confirmed evidence suggesting conflict, the speed of the roster shakeup sparked conversations across fan communities. On social media, speculation began spreading that certain players might not be fully confident in the new direction of the franchise. Again, these are just rumors circulating among fans, but they've added fuel to the growing narrative surrounding the Falcons' offseason. At the same time, Atlanta's front office has been trying to reshape the roster with new signings and strategic moves meant to fill the gaps left behind. Analysts have emphasized that this type of turnover can be part of a larger rebuild or restructuring process. Still, when multiple recognizable names leave within such a short window, it naturally leads to questions about what's really happening inside the organization. For supporters of the team, the biggest concern is whether these moves will ultimately make the Falcons stronger or leave them scrambling to rebuild key positions. Losing proven contributors always carries risk, especially when the team is already entering a new chapter under different leadership. And this is exactly why the situation has become such a major talking point. Because while Atlanta attempts to move forward, the sudden wave of departures has already created a storyline that fans and analysts can't stop discussing. But as surprising as these exits were, they might only be the beginning of a much bigger shift that could shape the Falcons' future in ways no one expected. The quarterback situation in Atlanta might be the most controversial part of this entire offseason. When Kevin Stefanski stepped into the spotlight, many fans expected stability and a clear direction at the most important position on the field. Instead, the early moves and rumors surrounding the quarterback room have sparked confusion, debate, and a wave of speculation across the football world. One of the biggest talking points revolves around the possibility of bringing in Tua Tagovailoa. Reports and discussions across sports media have suggested that Stefanski could be exploring veteran quarterback options to reshape the offense. While nothing has been fully confirmed, the idea alone was enough to send fans into a frenzy. For some supporters, bringing in a quarterback with Tua's experience could help stabilize the offense. But for others, it raised a serious question: what happens to the young quarterbacks already in the system? That's where the conversation becomes even more complicated. The Falcons already have a highly discussed young talent in Michael Penix Jr. Many fans believe Penix represented the future of the franchise, especially after the excitement surrounding his potential and development. But whenever rumors about veteran quarterbacks begin circulating, it naturally creates concern about how the depth chart might shift. Some analysts have pointed out that bringing in competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, many teams intentionally create quarterback battles to push younger players to improve. But others believe the situation could become messy if the coaching staff sends mixed signals about who the long-term starter will be. For a young quarterback trying to build confidence and momentum, uncertainty can sometimes slow development. The conversation doesn't stop there. Across social media and fan forums, another name keeps appearing in these debates: Shedeur Sanders. Sanders has become one of the most talked-about young quarterbacks in football, and supporters often argue that he has been underestimated by certain critics and decision-makers. Because of that, some fans have started connecting the dots between Atlanta's quarterback uncertainty and Sanders' growing reputation. To be clear, much of this discussion is speculation driven by fans and online commentators. There's no official confirmation that Sanders is directly involved in Atlanta's current quarterback plans, however. The narrative has gained traction because of the broader storyline: a young quarterback with something to prove and a league that constantly debates which players truly deserve the spotlight. What makes the situation even more interesting is how quickly narratives can flip in the NFL. One coaching decision, one surprising signing, or one breakout performance can completely change how fans view a team's strategy. If Stefanski ultimately commits to a veteran quarterback, it could shift the development timeline for younger players. But if he sticks with the current roster and focuses on building around youth, it could reinforce the belief that Atlanta is preparing for the future rather than chasing quick fixes. Either way, the quarterback room has already become the center of attention. Every move, rumor, and report is being analyzed by fans who want to understand the bigger picture. And if this offseason has proven anything so far, it's that the Falcons' quarterback situation may end up being one of the most closely watched storylines heading into the season. For a while now, the name that keeps surfacing in football conversations is Shedeur Sanders. Whether people are debating young quarterbacks, discussing future stars, or arguing about coaching decisions, Sanders somehow finds his way into the center of the conversation. And recently, that discussion has started connecting to what's happening around Kevin Stefanski and the shifting situation involving the Atlanta Falcons. Supporters of Sanders have been especially vocal online. Many believe he has been underestimated by certain critics and decision-makers in the football world. Throughout his rise, Sanders built a reputation for confidence, leadership, and the ability to handle pressure on big stages. Because of that, a growing group of fans believes that any doubt surrounding him will eventually backfire on those who questioned his potential. Recently, the narrative has gained even more momentum as discussions around Atlanta's roster moves and coaching decisions have started to heat up. With players leaving during free agency and uncertainty surrounding the team's long-term direction, some fans have begun suggesting that the situation could eventually highlight Sanders' value even more. The idea circulating online is simple. If certain teams struggle after overlooking or doubting him, Sanders' supporters believe it will only strengthen his reputation. Of course, much of this conversation remains speculation driven by fan debates and social media discussions. There's no official confirmation tying Sanders directly to the Falcons' current decisions. But in today's sports landscape, narratives often grow quickly once fans start connecting the dots between different storylines. Another reason Sanders keeps appearing in these conversations is because of the confidence he carries. Unlike many young quarterbacks who prefer to stay quiet, Sanders has shown that he isn't afraid of the spotlight. That personality naturally attracts both supporters and critics. Some see his confidence as the mindset of a future star, while others question whether he has something to prove at the professional level. This divide has only fueled more discussion. Every time a quarterback controversy surfaces around the league, Sanders' name reappears in debates about who deserves an opportunity and which young players are ready to take the next step. For fans who believe in his talent, any situation involving uncertainty at the quarterback position becomes another example of why Sanders could eventually silence the doubters. And that's why the current storyline feels so interesting. While the Falcons try to navigate roster changes and questions surrounding leadership, the broader football conversation continues to shift toward the league's next generation of quarterbacks. Sanders has positioned himself as one of the most talked-about names in that group. If he eventually proves the hype right, many supporters believe it will feel like a long-awaited moment of validation. And if teams that once overlooked him begin struggling while he finds success elsewhere, the narrative could flip almost overnight. Because in the NFL, reputations can change incredibly fast. One breakout season, one signature performance, or one unexpected opportunity can completely rewrite the story around a player. And for Shedeur Sanders, many fans believe that moment might be closer than people think. As the offseason moves continued to unfold, attention quickly shifted toward the people making those decisions behind the scenes. Analysts and commentators began questioning whether the front office strategy was actually solving the team's problems or just covering them up. The spotlight started turning toward roster construction, financial decisions, and the long-term vision surrounding the team led by Kevin Stefanski. One of the biggest criticisms centered around how the organization handled its offensive line situation over the past several years. Some analysts pointed out that the team had struggled to successfully draft and develop offensive linemen, forcing them to rely heavily on free agency. Instead of building young talent through the draft, the front office now appeared to be spending significant money on veteran players to fill the gaps. In the NFL, that strategy can work in the short term. Experienced players often bring leadership, stability, and proven performance, but it also comes with risk. Veteran contracts tend to be expensive, and if those players deal with injuries or performance drops, teams can quickly find themselves stuck with costly deals and limited flexibility. That's why some analysts began questioning whether this approach was a smart long-term plan or simply a reaction to earlier drafting mistakes. During recent sports discussions and broadcasts, several commentators openly debated the strategy. Some defended the moves, arguing that the team had no choice but to spend aggressively after missing on key draft opportunities in previous seasons. From their perspective, signing established veterans was the fastest way to stabilize the roster and protect the quarterback position. Others were far more critical. A few analysts described the situation as a cycle created by poor roster planning. If a team consistently struggles to draft key positions like offensive linemen, it eventually becomes dependent on free agency to fill those roles. And because free agency often requires overpaying for proven talent, the financial pressure continues to grow each offseason. That debate has become a major talking point across football media. Supporters of the front office believe the moves show urgency and a willingness to address weaknesses immediately. Critics, however, argue that these decisions highlight deeper issues with talent evaluation and long-term planning. At the center of it all is the simple question every NFL franchise faces: build through the draft or buy talent through free agency. The most successful teams usually find a balance between the two, developing young players while strategically adding veterans to strengthen key areas. Right now, many observers believe the team is leaning heavily toward the second approach. By bringing in experienced linemen and paying premium contracts, the organization is clearly trying to fix protection issues as quickly as possible. That could benefit whoever ends up leading the offense under center. But the pressure attached to those decisions is enormous. If the veteran signings perform well and the offensive line stabilizes, the front office will look like it made the right call. However, if injuries occur or performance drops, critics will likely point to the strategy as another example of short-term thinking. And that's why the debate surrounding the team's front office continues to grow louder. Every signing, every contract, and every roster move is now being analyzed closely by fans and analysts alike. Because in the NFL, success or failure often traces back to decisions made long before the season even begins. And right now, many people around the league are watching closely to see whether this front office strategy will finally pay off or become another storyline filled with questions and second-guessing. One of the biggest risks in this entire situation comes down to a single gamble the organization appears to be making: rebuilding the offensive line almost overnight. Instead of slowly developing young linemen through the draft, the team has shifted toward bringing in experienced veterans and hoping they can immediately stabilize the protection around the quarterback. On the surface, that sounds like a smart move. But in the NFL, quick fixes often come with serious long-term consequences. Several analysts have pointed out that the team is investing heavily in proven linemen such as Elgton Jenkins and Zion Johnson. Both players have strong reputations and experience playing multiple positions on the offensive line, which gives coaches flexibility when building the starting unit. Versatility is extremely valuable in the NFL, especially when injuries inevitably happen during the long season. A lineman who can shift from guard to center or even tackle can help keep the entire offensive system functioning. But that versatility also highlights the risk behind the strategy. Veteran players typically come with higher price tags, and many of them already have years of physical wear from the demands of the league. Some reports have mentioned injury concerns in the past for certain linemen, which naturally makes fans nervous when large contracts are involved. If a player misses significant time, that expensive investment can suddenly look like a major mistake. At the same time, the reasoning behind the move is easy to understand. Protecting the quarterback is one of the most important priorities for any football team. Analysts often say that games are won or lost in the trenches, and if the offensive line struggles, even the most talented quarterbacks can find themselves under constant pressure. That's exactly the scenario the team appears determined to avoid. During recent discussions among sports commentators, some analysts defended the aggressive spending. Their argument is simple. If previous drafts failed to produce reliable offensive linemen, the fastest way to fix the problem is to sign players who have already proven they can perform at a high level. From that perspective, paying veterans might actually be the safest option. Others strongly disagree. Critics believe this approach reflects deeper issues with roster development. In their view, constantly relying on free agency suggests the organization hasn't been able to properly evaluate and develop talent through the draft. Over time, that pattern can become expensive and unsustainable, especially if multiple veteran contracts start piling up. Another concern involves chemistry. Offensive lines work best when players develop communication and trust over several seasons together. When a team suddenly mixes several new veterans into the lineup at once, it can take time for that chemistry to develop. If the unit struggles early in the season, critics will likely question whether the front office rushed the rebuild instead of taking a more patient approach. Still, the coaching staff appears confident that the veteran additions will provide immediate stability. With players who have already performed at a high level in the league, the hope is that the offensive line can quickly become one of the team's strengths rather than a constant weakness. But that's the reality of this gamble. If the veterans stay healthy and perform the way they have in the past, the decision could completely transform the offense and silence many of the critics. On the other hand, if injuries or performance issues arise, the strategy could quickly become one of the most debated decisions of the entire offseason. As the offseason drama continues to build, the pressure surrounding Kevin Stefanski is starting to grow louder by the day. What began as normal offseason roster adjustments has slowly turned into a full-blown debate among fans, analysts, and commentators about whether the direction of the team is truly stable. And when a new coaching era begins with this many questions, the spotlight quickly shifts to the person leading the entire operation. For Stefanski, expectations were already high from the moment he stepped into the role. Coaching changes in the NFL are rarely quiet events, and fans usually expect immediate signs that the team is heading toward a stronger future. But with several players leaving during free agency and ongoing debates about roster construction, some supporters are beginning to feel uneasy about how things are unfolding. Online discussions have especially amplified the pressure. In today's sports world, every decision made by a coach is analyzed instantly across social media, podcasts, and sports networks. When multiple roster moves happen within a short period, fans naturally begin connecting the dots and forming their own theories about what's happening behind the scenes. While many of these conversations are purely speculative, they still shape the public narrative around a team. Some supporters remain optimistic about Stefanski's approach. They believe that major roster adjustments are sometimes necessary when a new coaching staff takes over. From this perspective, clearing out certain players and bringing in new talent could simply be part of a larger plan to reshape the team's identity. Rebuilding a roster often requires tough decisions, and not every move will immediately make sense to the outside world. However, critics see the situation differently. For them, the sudden changes and uncertainty raise concerns about stability within the organization. They argue that when players begin leaving and fans start questioning the direction of the team, it can create an environment where pressure builds quickly. And in the NFL, once that pressure starts mounting, it rarely fades until results on the field prove otherwise. Another factor adding to the scrutiny is the intense media coverage surrounding the league. Every offseason move becomes a headline, and every coaching decision is dissected by analysts looking for deeper meaning. If a team struggles early in the season after making significant changes, those decisions often come back into focus as potential mistakes. That's why the upcoming season could be incredibly important for Stefanski's reputation. If the roster changes lead to a stronger, more competitive team, the criticism will likely disappear almost overnight. Success on the field has a way of silencing even the loudest doubts. But if the team struggles, the conversation will only grow louder. Fans will revisit every offseason decision, every player departure, and every strategic gamble made by the coaching staff. In professional football, momentum can shift quickly and narratives can flip within a matter of weeks. Right now, Stefanski finds himself standing at the center of that storm. The expectations are high, the scrutiny is intense, and the margin for error is smaller than ever. Because in the NFL, a coach isn't just judged by plans or promises, they're judged by results. And very soon, everyone will see whether Stefanski's vision for the team can withstand the pressure that's already beginning to build. Everything that has happened during this offseason is building toward one moment, the start of the season. Because when the games finally begin, all the speculation, debates, and rumors surrounding the Atlanta Falcons will finally face the only thing that matters in the NFL: results on the field. Right now, the pressure surrounding Kevin Stefanski is impossible to ignore. A new coaching era always brings expectations, but this situation feels different. Between the surprising player departures, the controversial roster changes, and the constant online debates about leadership and direction, the spotlight has become incredibly intense. Every move Stefanski has made this offseason is already being analyzed by fans and analysts across the football world. If the team comes out strong when the season begins, the entire narrative could flip overnight. Winning games has a way of silencing critics faster than anything else in professional sports. The roster changes that look questionable during the offseason could suddenly be praised as bold and necessary decisions. Fans who were worried about the direction of the team might quickly start believing that Stefanski's vision was the right one all along. But if the team struggles early, the reaction could be brutal. Every decision made during the offseason would immediately come back under the microscope. Fans would start revisiting the players who left, the contracts that were signed, and the strategy behind the roster overhaul. In the NFL, momentum works both ways. Success builds belief, but early losses can create a wave of criticism that grows quickly. And that's why some fans have started bringing up another name in these conversations: Shedeur Sanders. Sanders has become one of the most talked about young quarterbacks in football, and his supporters believe he has something to prove. While there's no official link between Sanders and the Falcons' current situation, his name continues to appear in fan discussions about the league's future quarterback stars. Some fans even speculate that if certain teams struggle after overlooking or doubting him, Sanders could eventually become one of those players who proves everyone wrong. That kind of storyline happens all the time in the NFL. Players who were once questioned often return with breakout performances that completely change how people view their careers. Of course, for now, all of this remains speculation. The Falcons' future will ultimately depend on what happens once the season begins and the games start counting. Coaching strategies, roster moves, and offseason plans only matter if they translate into victories on the field. That's why the upcoming season feels so important. For Stefanski, it represents an opportunity to prove that the vision behind these controversial decisions actually works. For the players still on the roster, it's a chance to show that the team can overcome the uncertainty that surrounded the offseason. And for fans watching everything unfold, it's the moment when the truth finally comes out. Because in the NFL, talk is cheap. Rumors fade, debates quiet down, and narratives disappear the moment the scoreboard starts telling the real story. And very soon, everyone will see whether this offseason chaos was the beginning of something special or the start of a much bigger problem.